Welcome to part one of the Supermarionation project interview, part of the Power of Working Together Better interview series. Today we will be interviewing Oliver Grig, the project manager who oversaw a high-stakes project that was challenging due to the tight deadlines, complex logistics and constantly evolving requirements. The project was a resounding success, resulting in a Blu-ray box set of a documentary about the pioneering Andersens, known for their work on TV series such as the Thunderbirds. The documentary received considerable attention from both the industry and the media. The release was considered one of the company's greatest accomplishments, culminating in a flawless premiere, screening and celebration. In part one, we will be asking Ollie about what factors he considered were key to helping his people work together better. To what extent would you say that getting your people to work together better was the key to this project's success?
I would say that it wasn't just the key, it was everything about the project, really. It was one of the largest projects that we worked on in terms of volume of people, to start with, both sort of internal employees of the company and external contractors, and just a huge amount of people, an army of people, who all were completely interdependent. And so, yeah, it was, if the people hadn't worked together, there's no way the thing would have happened at all.
No, okay, that's good. And how do you know that it was down to the people and not just to say down to the process or to something else?
I think because it being an artistic endeavour, there were an awful lot of personalities involved. Not all of them the most easy or perhaps conducive to kind of working together, especially people that have worked sort of quite sort of individually for quite a long time, or at least in their small little kind of bubbles, and then to suddenly have to work with all these different bubbles and make sure that their work was in sync with the other people's, and to work sort of professionally with each other was quite a challenge in many ways.
I imagine it was, yes, and we'll dig into that more, which is great. So how many people were we talking about here? If there was an army of people.
Well, I think all in all, there were probably getting on for 100 people with as well as the release of the DVD and the Blu-ray box set. There was the documentary itself, and in terms of the contributors to the documentary, we had puppeteers building puppets, we had puppetry specialist filming cameramen, and then we had the people restoring the original footage that were kind of film experts. We had, sound experts. We had the people making the Blu-ray itself. And then we had all the people organising the theatrical release for the documentary, talking about the rights, clearing the people, so there really is an awful lot of stuff to happen, and to make sure that it all happens in time and without ruffling anybody's feathers was the biggest challenge.
So what was the timescale of this project?
I think it depends. I suppose there were a few different sections. There was the initial kind of planning and sort of discussion phase for the documentary itself, which was a smaller team. Obviously, it was the creative team for the documentary and us working out exactly what we wanted to do with the film. But I'd say from inception to the end, it must have been about getting on for 18 months, I would say, about 18 months.
That's a long time.
It was a long time.
Long time to coordinate it. It sounds. I mean, obviously, we're interviewing people who manage a technical element. It sounds like there's a lot of technical people obviously different skills, different functions happening here. But it sounds like there was also quite a lot of technical happening.
Very much so. Yes, a huge amount. In fact, some of it, fairly experimental. As I said, the large part of it was restoring the original shows, the Jerry Anderson puppet shows, and these were filmed on a variety of different formats. So some were filmed on film, on 35mm film, some filmed on 12mm, and then some filmed on video. We had all these kind of old bits of kind of home movie footage of people practicing all these sort of things, which were amazing for the documentary. And so we needed to get it on there. But when you're making an HD Blu-ray release, to get something that's filmed on Super 8 or on some old archaic video format to look okay, yeah, there was an awful lot of technical challenges as well, and we were quite, we did things that hadn't been done before, really. So that was exciting.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting, but also must have been difficult to manage given all the different types of people involved, I guess.
The problem was, I think, is like with lots of projects like that, is definition of done. There were an awful lot of people with very vested interest in it, and people who are very emotionally attached to it for various reasons, both or various parts of it. So there's people attached to the original source material, and there's people attached to the documentary we're making, and there's people attached to the release that we're making. And so making sure that everyone was happy. But obviously, you know, how long is a piece of string? You could keep going and going, oh, look, there's still a bit you haven't painted out. Can you go back and do that? You know, we could have been there. We could have made that 18 months could easily have been 5 years or 10 years, which is why, you know, sometimes these labors of love do take such a long time because people don't know when to stop.
Yeah, and I think that's probably true. I think if I think about all my clients who are the ones who are particularly technical, probably even true of myself. When I'm involved, or when I hear my clients involved, or any technical person involved with a thing that they really love, it can expand, can't it? The definition of done can be a real challenge.
As I say, it will expand to fill the time given, or whatever the expression is.
Exactly. So we'll go back and explore how you made decisions in a minute. But I'm intrigued to know how it was how these people were structured. I know you said you had both teams and groups. So how many teams did you have? How many groups did you have? What were they each responsible for?
Well, I suppose they came. Some of them came essentially ready packaged in the sense that we had the restoration team who worked as a team because they were working in the restoration department where they had all the equipment, and in fact they used to be part of the BBC, and we then brought them in house and we had our own restoration department. And so they were the film and video specialists who were doing the work on essentially the source material. Then we had the creative team for the documentary, and that was the director and the researchers, and also some of the specialist cameramen who were doing some of the recreations as part of the documentary. We did quite a lot of recreations with original puppets and with new puppets, and we kind of got the old guys in to kind of show us how they did stuff. And so that was itself a team that fluctuated hugely because there was the core crew, and then for some of the set pieces they needed to bring in loads more people. Obviously they had the contributors, and then a very watchful representative of the sort of Andersen estate, Jerry Anderson's son, who was very involved. And then obviously we had the internal production team, so the people at Network that were essentially running the whole thing, which in itself was a challenge because the head of Network, who was himself a Jerry Anderson fan and so had a very personal relationship to it, was very keen on all of it and likes to be involved in all of it, and is also a perfectionist. So there was sort of managing his expectations as much as anything else, wanting to make sure that obviously he got what he wanted, but sometimes his two desires to hit a date and have it released at some point, and his desires to have everything be perfect and add more and more and more things. Go, oh, I've just had this other brilliant idea, was always a challenge.
Yeah, I can really imagine how many different people you had to keep happy, I think. And
that was the name of the game mostly.
Yeah, yes, I can see that. So was there like so you were part of the delivery team? Is that like a project management team? And you were running the project management team, is that right?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I would say with the boss, although he was more of a creative lead, I would say you could describe him perhaps as the overall director and me as the producer of the product. So it was my job to say no to him sometimes, or yes, or kind of mold him into something that would work within the parameters that he himself had kind of tried to set, and I was then trying to
So he was your kind of expert in your team, basically, wasn't he? So he could give you the standards element of what was expected.
Yes, very much, and the personal knowledge as well. He had great personal knowledge of it. He's like an encyclopedia. But then plus obviously all the other people. So it was about collating that knowledge, and as I said, knowing when to stop, because we could have gone forever.
Yeah, of course. And he probably needed you then to giving it a non-creative idea, obviously sympathetic, to tell them, or to at least question what was actually happening and how far to go with it.
Indeed, although it was often I used to describe it as finding creative ways to say no, or creative ways to say something was, not, I don't know, it was the opposite of creative. But yes, it was interesting.
And so in your team, so there was you, there was your creative director, and then who else was on that team that had to actually deliver the project itself?
We had the production manager, who was sort of looking after the production side of it, i.e. the making of the box and the discs and all of that kind of stuff, dealing with the distributor that way. And then we had the studio manager in terms of the making of the program itself, i.e. the Blu-ray, the encoding, the management of the restoration team. So there was kind of the technical side of the building of the release itself, and then there was the technical side of the building of the film itself. So yeah, we had an awful lot of sort of moving parts, but quite a strong. So I suppose the management team was, if you had, I would say 7 heads of departments, and then with me and Tim at the top, I would say.
Right. Okay. So it was your job to pull everyone together.
Yes.
Right. Okay. That yeah. Okay. That would have been interesting to do. So you each had individual roles, and so everyone had a key responsibility, and often a technical responsibility, it sounds like. And then together you would then achieve the result, the output, which was basically you had to get the DVD box set out, and you need to get a premiere done, and those kind of things.
And the film had to get finished.
And the film, of course, yes, of course, the film itself. Yes, yeah, exactly. That's right. Okay, so that makes sense of the structure. And then you obviously had these groups of people, the technical groups of people working underneath each of these heads, getting stuff done. So that was your structure. And that's quite helpful to understand what your structure was, because everybody's team and group is not really set up in the same way. So that gives us an insight onto that. So if we think about the challenges that you had, what would you say your main challenges were, especially when you started off?
I think for me, the main challenges were, I think, sort of shepherding the more creative types.
Yeah.
At least 3 of those department heads, could happily keep going forever. That's sort of the restoration department, the kind of creative department of thinking of all these great things we could do, and then the director of the movie, all wanted to just keep going forever and ever and ever, and then kept wanting to add things. So for me, the challenge was bringing it in on time, getting it to a point, people understanding deadlines. And of course, internal deadlines slipped, but the end deadlines couldn't. We had things booked. We had a big launch party at the BFI, and so there were things that couldn't or not easily move, and to get it all done, and production deadlines as well, in terms of making, it was one of the most expensive, I think it was the most expensive physical box sets that we made. We went through lots of iterations of it, but there was obviously timescales involved in getting that thing made and shipped and distributed to everybody, and so there was an awful lot of moving parts that if deadlines started slipping, then things were going to start causing problems.
So what would you say your main tip was back then to keep people on track? Because it sounds like, when we've mentioned it twice now, I can only imagine exactly what that was like for you. Everywhere you looked, you had people trying to make the project longer, and then it was your job to to somehow make sure it didn't happen that way. So what advice would you give?
I think it's also worth saying that I was also invested and wanted it to be good, so I was trying to say yes. I suppose I wasn't completely heartless in the sense of just saying no for the sake of it. I would try and make something happen within the parameters, whereas they were just trying to make it happen and not necessarily thinking about those parameters. So I think that was my job. I'd say the thing that my biggest tip would be to build in as much sort of wiggle room or kind of time as you can, because deadlines, as I said, deadlines slip. So if those deadlines are actual fixed hard deadlines that mean that you can't do it, you're not going to make it. So build in far more sort of redundancy or whatever you want to call it than you think you need, because you're always going to use it. It's always going to get sucked up. And then make sure that your relationships with the people around those deadlines are so good that in the event of problems, in the event of, oh, actually, we are going to be a day late with that, they don't turn around and go, well, you've missed your slot, everything, you know what I mean? So it's also about maintaining those relationships as well.
So, and it sounds like there's relationships on both ends, really, because I have worked with people whereby they have put in redundancy to deadlines, but the relationships with those people have not been great. So every time they kind of go, right now, where is it? Well, it hasn't happened, and I go, okay, then we will set another deadline then, and you come around again. Oh, so where is it? And it keeps going round. So without that relationship, and I think you alluded to it, which is you had a shared interest with them to do quality work. So
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly it. I think everybody wanted it to be good, and everybody was invested in it. And so if you went to somebody, you're going to get this a day late. They didn't throw their toys out the pram because they were just, thinking of their bit of the project and thinking, oh, this is just going to affect me. They understood why, and that's the other thing. People have investment in it. So if you're saying this is late because we've got this extra new thing that happened, which is why it's going to be even better but a day late. Do you know what I mean? So, or whatever it would be. And then at the end, with the production people who really did pull it out of the bag in terms of making that box and making it happen, they wanted it to be good. They were really involved really early on in terms of the design process and sort of seeing early cuts of the film so they could kind of get excited about it too, because if they're not excited, where's their motivation to be out there hassling the producers and making sure the samples come in on time and all of that kind of stuff.
So how were you able to ensure that everyone was engaged and aligned, to this shared aim? How did you do that?
Well, I think some of it came from sort of pre the project itself. I think there was quite a lot of that in terms of the values of the company and the way the company worked and the relationship that we'd already built. As I said, apart from the creative team on the documentary itself, who widened out, and there were lots of people that kind of came in that were contractors just for that project, but those sort of heads of department, as it were, both internal and external, were all people that had worked with the company before, or were internal people at the company. They all understood. Generally, the people that worked there fortunately in the same place that I am now, wanted to be there and had some kind of interest in it, and that's why they were there. Whether they were fans or just interested in the creative process or film nerds or whatever it will be, they all had some kind of shared interest. And I think if you can get people that buy into it at that level, then you're basically most of the way there.
And how did you demonstrate that you were as committed to the creative output as the people who wanted to keep expanding it and perfecting it? How did you let them know that, do you think?
I think, I don't know whether it's just my personality. I think I was clearly kind of along for the ride and part of the party. I think it's important, and I've worked on other projects previously and in other lines of work where the producer or the person in essentially the role that I was in don't appear to be that. They just seem to be there to hold the purse strings and say no. And so there is often that kind of pull or just sort of general kind of, well, this guy's going to say no to this, and there's a real kind of problem with that dynamic. But I think everyone knew that if I was saying that we had to, say stop at some point, or if I was doing it, there were reasons for that. And I think it reminds me of a film set or acting or kind of whatever that is. If there's somebody saying, if someone going, oh, let's do this, let's jump from here, or film with someone going, well, no, that's not safe, or we've only got this light. No one thinks they're doing it because they don't care. They're doing it because it's their job and they have to do it. And so people do generally understand that everyone is just doing their job. And I think that's really the takeaway from all of this, is if everyone understands that everyone else is just doing their job. And sometimes you have to remind people, because there are some people going, well, that job's taking too long, but all you have to do is make them see it's all about empathy and understanding that people just care and want it to be the best that it can be. And then that's the start of the key for
I think it's demonstrating empathy, isn't it? And I think what you said there is that demonstrating that you care. And I think when you're mentioning things can't be done because of the light or safety, people understand there's a because, and the because makes sense, I think. I don't know whether that rings true for you.
Absolutely. Well, I've never been and will never be the kind of person that just says because, or because I said so. It doesn't work. Also, what's the point? There's, I'm not going to do it for the sake of it. So no, I think people always understood there was a reason, and also could see that I was giving and taking. That's the other thing, is you can't just sort of take, you have to kind of give at some places. So in some places I would say, okay, great, let's do that extra bit of filming, or let's do that extra restoration on this one, or yes, we'll pay the money to get that rare bit of footage that's just been uncovered, or whatever it was. I wasn't always saying no. Sometimes I said yes, but mostly I said yes.
But it got done, which is great. So it sounds like people understood that you cared about them and their interests, and that you were doing your job. And the way that you were doing your job is sometimes you had to say no, but if you could say yes, you would say yes.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed part 1, where we heard Oliver Grig talk about the factors that ensured the project's success. Ollie emphasised that the success of the project hinged on the ability of the diverse teams to work together effectively. He stressed the importance of building strong relationships with and between team members to foster a collaborative environment and to ensure project alignment. Ollie highlighted the challenge of managing expectations of various diverse stakeholder groups, including the passionate creative team and the company's head, who had a strong personal connection to the project. Overall, Ollie explained that the project's success required a fine balancing act between allowing for creative freedom with the practical constraints of deadlines and budgetary limitations. He spoke about the need for being very flexible and adaptable to address the unforeseen challenges and the changing requirements during the project's execution. Ollie also found that it was really important to find and recruit people who had a shared passion for the project. This helped team members contribute significantly, and they were more engaged and motivated. He underscored the importance of effective communication and transparency throughout the project to keep everybody aligned and informed. Transparency and effective communication allowed for better trust, which allowed for better productivity. It helped that Ollie made the effort to understand the motivations and the different perspectives of each team member, and this helped him effectively manage their expectations and contributions to the project. I look forward to you joining me in part 2, where we look at the importance of individual accountability and getting the balance between control and being flexible enough to allow for creativity and changing requirements to occur.